I want to tell you about the Tuesday afternoon I drove to an address I did not recognize and knocked on a door I had absolutely no business knocking on. I had been sitting in my car outside that house for 47 minutes. I know it was 47 because I kept checking my phone, telling myself I would leave at the next minute mark. And then the next one. And then the next. I did not leave. What I found on the other side of that door did not just end my marriage. It quietly dismantled the entire version of my life I thought I was living. And what I did next, the part that still surprises me when I think about it, shocked even me. This is that story. Marcus and I met at 26, through mutual friends at a birthday dinner neither of us had particularly wanted to attend. He was quiet in a way I liked, the kind of quiet that meant he was actually listening, not waiting for his turn to speak. We dated for 2 years before moving in together, engaged at 30, married at 32, in a small ceremony in his parents' garden. 60 people, good food, no drama. That was very much our style. He worked in logistics management, coordinating freight contracts across different regions, which meant his schedule was never fully predictable. 2, sometimes 3 days away each week had been part of our relationship almost from the very beginning. It was simply how we worked. I managed. He called. We made it normal because it was normal, or so I believed. We had agreed early on to wait before starting a family. His travel, my career, the timing never felt right. We told ourselves we had time. By year 8, we finally felt ready, and we began trying. I was 34. He was 35. We were not worried yet. We should perhaps have started sooner, but we were not worried yet. What I remember most about the early years is that he was genuinely present when he was home. We cooked together on Sunday mornings, proper meals, not shortcuts. We had a ritual of long afternoon drives on Saturdays, no particular destination, just music and conversation, and wherever the road went. He used to give me a back massage after a hard week, without being asked. I would fall asleep halfway through, and he would just cover me with a blanket and let me sleep. We divided the household admin along the lines of who minded it least. I handled the accounts, the tax records, the insurance renewals. He handled anything requiring a phone call, because I find calling strangers quietly unbearable. We had each other's passwords, each other's login details, the low-level access to each other's lives that long-term partnership just quietly accumulates. I never thought twice about it. Neither did he. Until, I suppose, he should have. He was not always hollow. Whatever he became, he was not always that. Looking back, I can see now that something began shifting around year 8. Not dramatically. Nothing you could point to and name cleanly. More like a slow turning of a dial that you do not notice because it happens 1 degree at a time. The Sunday cooking stopped first. He started saying he was tired from the week, which was fair. His role had expanded. More contracts, more responsibility. I did not push it. I cooked alone or we ordered in, and that became the new normal without either of us deciding it should be. The Saturday drives faded next. I just want to stay in, he would say. Again, reasonable. Again, I adjusted. He stopped giving massages somewhere in year 9. Not suddenly. Just gradually less, and then not at all. When I mentioned it once, gently, he said he was exhausted, that the travel was grinding him down, that he felt like he was constantly performing and just needed to switch off when he was home. I believed him, because all of those things were plausible, and because I was tired too. 18 months of fertility appointments and hope and disappointment will do that to a couple. We were both running on less than we used to have. What I understand now is that a man who is genuinely exhausted comes home and rests. A man who is emotionally somewhere else entirely comes home and goes through the motions. And the motions can look identical from the outside for a very long time. There was an evening somewhere in year 9, I could not tell you the exact month, where we were sitting at the kitchen table after dinner. He had poured us both a whiskey, which was something we used to do on Fridays when the week had been long. It had been a while since we had done that. I remember thinking, it felt like an effort at something. We were not arguing. We were not even really talking about anything in particular. And then he turned his glass slowly in his hands and said, almost to himself, "Do you ever feel like we are just running the same day on repeat?" He was not being cruel. His voice was not sharp or pointed. He said it the way you would remark on the weather. A mild observation, barely worth finishing the sentence. I looked at him across the table. "Yeah," I said. "Sometimes." And then neither of us said anything else. He topped up his glass. I finished mine. We went to bed. We never returned to it. Not directly. He did not bring it up again, and I did not push it. I think because I was half afraid of what a proper conversation might uncover, and half convinced that saying nothing was the same as it not being true. It was not the same. That comment, half-formed, said to his glass more than to me, on an evening when he had actually made the effort to pour us both a drink, is the moment I come back to most. Not because it explains everything, but because it was the one time he came close to telling me the truth about how he felt. And neither of us was brave enough to follow it somewhere real. I think that was the window. That unresolved, unnamed distance between year 9 and 10. I think that is where Claire began. She was not the cause of what went wrong between us, but she was what he chose, instead of fixing it. By year 10, the distance I had grown used to started feeling less like exhaustion and more like concealment. A subtle but distinct shift I could not quite name at the time. The phone started going face down. For 11 years, his phone had lived on the kitchen counter, the coffee table, charging openly on his side of the bed. Now it came with him everywhere. Now it was on silent, in a way that felt deliberate rather than accidental. His travel, which had always been routine, started feeling different too, not more frequent, but less accountable. He had always told me roughly where he was going and why. Now the details were vaguer. A client meeting, a site review. He would be back Thursday. Which Thursday? This Thursday. Right. I noticed. I said nothing, because we were already in the habit of not quite saying things to each other, and one more unspoken observation felt like it fit the pattern we had built. It started with something as mundane as our annual accounts. Every March, I gathered 3 months of statements, receipts, and expense records for our accountant, a task Marcus had always left entirely to me because he found it in his words. Soul-destroying. I was going through the joint account statement line by line, the way I always did, and I flagged a charge that did not immediately make sense. A restaurant I did not recognize. A Saturday evening. A town about 40 minutes from where we live. On its own, it meant nothing. He ate out for work constantly. It could have been anything. But something made me pause. Instinct, maybe, or just the accumulated weight of small things I had been quietly filing away for months. I went into his email, I had his password from years of handling our admin, and he had never changed it, and I searched for the travel itinerary from that weekend. I found it within 30 seconds. A company email confirming a 3-day site visit. Departure, that Friday morning. Destination, a logistics hub 4 hours north of us. Return, the following Monday. The restaurant charge was from that Saturday evening. The town it was in was 40 minutes from our front door. He had been home, or close enough to home that he had never left at all. While I believed he was 4 hours north, he was 40 minutes away, having dinner somewhere he clearly hoped I would never have reason to look up. I sat very still for a moment. Then I closed the laptop, put the receipts back in the folder, made a fresh cup of tea I did not drink, and I started paying very close attention to everything. The moment everything shifted happened on an ordinary Wednesday evening in October. Marcus had left his laptop open on the kitchen table and gone to take a shower. I was walking past with a cup of tea when a message notification appeared on the screen. I was not looking for it. I was not snooping. I just happened to be in the right place, at the wrong time. The message was from someone named Claire, and it said, I remember this word for word because I have replayed it in my head more times than I can count. It said, Liam kept saying Dada all through dinner tonight. He was looking at the door the whole time. I didn't know what to tell him. Liam. I stood absolutely still. In the middle of my own kitchen. Marcus and I do not have children. We had been trying for a child for 18 months. We had cried together over negative tests. We had held hands in waiting rooms. We had talked about names. And somewhere, there was a little boy named Liam who called my husband Daddy. I put my tea down very carefully on the counter so I would not drop it. I walked to the living room. I sat on the sofa. Biscuit climbed up next to me and put his head in my lap, the way he does when something is wrong and he cannot quite work out what. By the time Marcus came out of the shower, I had decided 2 things. First, I was not going to say a single word. Not yet. Not until I knew exactly what I was dealing with. And second, I was going to find out everything. Didn't know what to tell him. For the next 3 weeks, I became someone I did not entirely recognize. I smiled at breakfast. I asked about his day. I made plans with him for the following month, a weekend away, dinner with friends, knowing I might never follow through on any of them. I was performing a version of my life while quietly dismantling it behind the scenes. Claire was not hard to find. Her surname was visible in her profile, and a name combined with the general area gave me enough to pull up an address through public electoral records. It took about 20 minutes. It is easier than people think. She lived 38 minutes from our house. 38 minutes. For what appeared to be nearly 2.5 years. That detail sat in my chest like a stone for a very long time. I drove there on a Thursday afternoon when Marcus thought I was visiting my mother. I parked on the opposite side of the street and sat there. I told myself I just needed to see the house, to make it real. I was not going to knock. 47 minutes later, I knocked. A woman answered, late 30s, dark hair pulled back, holding a dish towel. She looked at me with the completely open expression of someone who has absolutely no idea who I am. And in that moment, I understood with total clarity that she did not. She had no idea I existed. She had no idea that the man she was building a life with had a wife 38 minutes away who was currently standing on her doorstep, trying to keep her voice steady. I said I was terribly sorry to bother her, that I had the wrong house, that I was looking for someone on the next street over. She smiled and said no trouble at all and closed the door. As I pulled away, I glanced up at the first-floor window. Claire was standing there, holding him. A little boy, about 2 years old. She did not know yet what was coming. She was just a mother at a window, watching a stranger drive away. He had Marcus's coloring, that same dark hair, that same way of going very still while he looked at things. I drove to a car park about a mile away, stopped the car, and sat there for a long time. Then I called a solicitor. Here is the part that still surprises me about myself. I did not want chaos. I did not want a confrontation in the kitchen where we both said things we could not take back. I did not want to call his mother or message his friends or post anything anywhere. I wanted to be precise, methodical. I wanted to leave no loose ends. I spent 4 weeks working with a solicitor I had found through a recommendation, someone completely outside our social circle with no connection to Marcus whatsoever. In that time, we identified 3 things that changed the nature of my divorce significantly. First, Marcus had a secondary bank account I had no knowledge of, into which a portion of his income had been redirected for at least 2 years. Second, he was co-named on the lease of Claire's home, which had never been disclosed as a financial liability in any of our joint accounts or tax submissions. Third, there were expenses claimed against his company account, described as client entertainment costs that corresponded, on closer inspection, to dates and locations that had nothing to do with any client. None of this was hidden brilliantly. It was hidden just enough that a trusting wife with no reason to look would never find it. The moment someone looked, it unraveled quite quickly. On a Friday evening in December, a night Marcus believed was entirely normal, a quiet dinner at home and an early night, I was already gone. I had spent the previous week moving my personal belongings, my documents, my half of the savings and biscuit to a friend's spare room. I left one thing on the kitchen counter when I collected the last of my things that afternoon. His laptop, open, with our divorce petition on the screen, filed with the court that same morning. I did not write a note. I did not send a message. I simply closed the front door behind me. He called 17 times that evening. I let everyone go to voicemail. By the following morning, a solicitor's letter was on its way to him directly, and there was nothing further for us to say to each other that did not need to go through legal channels. What I did not plan for was Claire. 8 days after I filed, my phone rang from a number I did not recognize. I almost did not answer. When I did, there was a pause, and then a voice said, "I think you came to my door last month. I think I know who you are." She had found my name through the divorce filing, which is public record. She had looked me up, and then, and I genuinely respect this, she had decided to call me directly rather than go through Marcus or pretend none of it was happening. We talked for just over 2 hours. I will not share everything from that conversation because some of it belongs only to the 2 of us. But I will tell you what mattered most. Claire had been told, from the very beginning of their relationship, that Marcus was in an unhappy marriage heading toward divorce, that it was complicated and slow, and that he was waiting for the right moment to finalize everything cleanly. She had believed she was the person he was moving toward, not the person he was hiding. She had been waiting, patiently, and then less patiently, and then, in the months before everything collapsed, with the kind of frustration that had apparently begun to show at his end, as the carelessness I had started noticing at mine. He was not falling apart because he felt guilty. He was falling apart because 2 lives he had kept carefully separated were pulling in opposite directions. hard enough that he could not hold both still anymore. She had been lied to just as completely as I had, just in different directions. I will not pretend it was easy to hear, or that there was not a part of me that found it nearly impossible to extend any sympathy in that moment. But I believed her. The timeline she described matched precisely. She was not protecting him. She was furious. We met once in person, a week later at a cafe neither of us had any connection to. We sat across from each other and compared notes, in the strange, careful way of two people who have been handed the same disaster from opposite ends. And then together, we submitted everything we had, the financial records, the lease documentation, the discrepancies in his tax filings, to both the Revenue Authority and the family court. I did not do that out of anger. I want to be clear about that. I did it because it was accurate and relevant, and it was the right thing to do. Whatever version of events Marcus thought he could maintain needed to rest on the actual facts. The divorce was finalized 9 months after I filed. Between the undisclosed assets, the financial irregularities, and the court's findings around the concealed property, Marcus left the marriage with considerably less than he had planned on. I do not know what happened between him and Claire after that. I made a decision early on that once the legal process was complete, that chapter was fully closed. I have not looked him up. I have not asked anyone who might know. Whatever his life looks like now is not something I need information about. What I did not expect through any of this was how steady I was. People talk about betrayal like it breaks you open, and maybe for some people, it does. For me, it was more like everything went very quiet, very clear. Like a fog I had not noticed, suddenly lifting. I think about Liam sometimes, a little boy who had absolutely nothing to do with any of this. I hope he is all right. That feels like the right thing to carry forward. Not the anger, not the accounting of everything lost, just a quiet hope for a child who deserved better than the situation he was born into. I have a small flat now. 1 bedroom. Good light in the mornings. A succulent on the windowsill that has survived significantly longer than I expected it to. And Biscuit, who did not require a custody arrangement because he made his own position on the matter entirely clear from day one. I am 39 years old. I am starting again, in the way that only feels possible once you have finally stopped pretending something broken is still whole.